Have you ever imagined a single angel defeating the greatest army of its time in just one night? It sounds impossible, but it's recorded in the scriptures. This is not just an ancient story, it's proof that when every door closes, God opens a way that no one can shut. How many times have you felt surrounded, trapped, facing problems so overwhelming they seem to crush you? That's exactly how Jerusalem felt before the king of Assyria, until a response from heaven changed everything. Today, you're going to discover how one angel revealed the power of the living God, humbling an entire empire and turning a night of terror into a morning of victory. Throughout this video, you'll see how this biblical narrative speaks directly to our current battles, and how the same God who acted in the past is still acting today. So take a moment, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment the word victory to declare that you also believe God can move in your life. Thank you so much for your support. It's essential for us to continue on this journey of faith and hope. Jerusalem was surrounded. It was the 8th century before Christ, and King Sennacherib of Assyria, known for his cruelty and overwhelming military power, had extended his dominion over many nations. The people of Israel looked beyond the city walls and saw the vast enemy army ready to strike. The pressure wasn't only physical, it was psychological. Letters filled with intimidation arrived, mocking the God of Israel and challenging his authority. How could they resist a force that seemed invincible? The Assyrian king wasn't just attacking the stone walls, he was targeting the confidence in the hearts of the people. He knew that destroying faith was as effective as destroying a fortress. By mocking God, Sennacherib sowed seeds of doubt. Can the Lord really deliver us when no other God saved the conquered nations? Imagine the fear of parents looking at their children, unsure if there would even be a future. The silence of the night was pierced by the distant sound of enemy troops, and every drumbeat sent a chill of uncertainty. But inside the city, another movement was beginning to rise. Amid the anguish and fear, there were still those who remembered the ancient promises that the Lord of hosts would never abandon his people. All eyes turned to King Hezekiah, looking to him not just for political leadership, but for a gesture of faith. The contrast between the human power of Assyria and the apparent weakness of Jerusalem set the stage for a greater spiritual drama. Could such a small people stand firm by trusting in God alone? This is the moment when the tension rises. It's no longer just a military siege, but a confrontation between human pride and divine glory. And it is at this very critical point that a choice arises. Will Hezekiah bow to fear? Or will he bring the enemy's defiance before God? Within the walls of Jerusalem, life had become an almost unbearable burden. The storehouses were beginning to empty. Water was rationed by the pitcher, and each day without an attack felt like merely delaying the inevitable. Entire families gathered in silence, trying to hide their fear from the children. Some wept quietly, remembering times of peace when the city gates opened for trade, not for war. The enemy didn't need to strike to win. The siege alone was already draining the people's strength. Accounts speak of cold, endless nights where the sound of the Assyrian armies outside echoed as a constant reminder of the threat. Weary soldiers looked at one another, unsure if they could hold on. Every meager meal reminded them that their resources were dwindling, and when letters of defiance circulated, the sense of helplessness only grew deeper. It felt as though their faith was under siege, right along with the city walls. Yet in the midst of despair, a spark of hope began to rise. Some gathered in small homes to pray. Others recited ancient psalms, remembering how the Lord had once delivered Israel from even greater enemies. These scenes, simple and quiet, showed that the people, though fragile, were not entirely defeated. The human heart finds unexpected ways to endure when there is nothing left to hold on to. But it was clear the city wouldn't survive on courage alone. It needed leadership that could turn fear into prayer and uncertainty into trust. All eyes turned to Hezekiah. What would the king do in the face of such a threat? Would he yield to terror or lay it all before God? King Hezekiah received the letter of defiance sent by Sennacherib. Every word was a dagger aimed at Israel's faith. Mockery, threats, and the bold claim that no God could save Jerusalem. But Hezekiah didn't tear the letter in anger, nor did he seek human reinforcements. Instead, he went up to the temple of the Lord. There, in solemn silence, he opened the letter before God and spread it out on the altar. The gesture was more than symbolic. It was the complete surrender of a king who knew he could not rely on his own strength. Hezekiah prayed, "Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see, and hear the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to reproach the living God." 2 Kings 19:16. This was not merely a plea for deliverance, it was a cry for the honor of God's own name. While Assyria trusted in its swords, Jerusalem placed its hope in the invisible power of the Most High. The contrast could not have been more striking. Picture the scene. A king clothed in garments of mourning, the letter open before an altar, and the people waiting in anticipation. There were tears, there was fear, but there was also a faith that refused to give in. At that moment, the weight of history shifted hands. The conflict was no longer between Assyria and Judah, but between human pride and the glory of God. Prayer transformed the battlefield, from outside the walls to within the sanctuary. This act of surrender did not bring an immediate answer in the eyes of the people. Silence still reigned, but something had already changed. The king had placed the nation's future in God's hands, and when faith is laid bare like this, there is always a response. The question was, in what form would it come? When Hezekiah poured out his heart before God, the answer did not delay. The prophet Isaiah sent a clear message to the king. "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, because you have prayed to me about Sennacherib, king of Assyria, I have heard you." 2 Kings 19:20. What weight those words carried. Amid the sound of enemy drums and the silence of Jerusalem's streets, a voice of hope echoed. God was listening. God was in control. Isaiah didn't bring a military strategy or announce human reinforcements. He brought only one certainty. He shall not come into this city, nor shoot an arrow there. By the same way that he came, by the same he shall return. 2 Kings 19:32-33. It was as if heaven itself declared publicly that the battle did not belong to Judah, but to the Lord. This promise, spoken by a prophet both known and respected, rekindled confidence in the hearts of many who had lost their strength. Think of the impact of these words on a people living in agony. Families who had been praying in silence could now declare, "God has heard." Weary soldiers could rise again, not by the strength of their arms, but by the assurance that they would not be alone. Hezekiah, who had bowed in weakness, could now stand in faith. The prophetic word didn't just console, it repositioned the entire nation before the threat. And yet, the tension did not vanish. Outside, the enemy army was still there with its tents and swords. The promise had been given, but its fulfillment had not yet arrived. And here comes the inevitable question. If God had guaranteed victory, how would he reveal his power? God's answer to Hezekiah's prayer did not come through human swords, but through a heavenly intervention. The biblical text declares, "Then it came to pass on a certain night that the angel of the Lord went out." 2 Kings 19:35. A single phrase, but filled with power. Who is this angel of the Lord who appears repeatedly throughout sacred history? He is the messenger of God, sent in moments when the impossible needed to become reality. Throughout tradition, some interpreters have associated the angel of the Lord with the angel of the presence, the one who directly manifests the glory of God. Others identify him as a foreshadowing of Christ himself in celestial form, a traditional view. Regardless of interpretation, one thing is certain: this being is no ordinary angel. He acts as the direct representative of the Most High, carrying divine authority to save or to judge. Whenever he appears, his presence shifts the destiny of men. The Bible records remarkable episodes of his intervention. It was the angel of the Lord who appeared to Moses in the burning bush, Exodus 3, who stood beside Joshua before the conquest of the Promised Land, Joshua 5:13-15, and who protected Israel from the Egyptians during the Exodus, Exodus 14:19. Every time this messenger descended, something extraordinary happened: deliverance, judgment, unexpected victory. Thus, his arrival before the Assyrian army was the sign of an unprecedented event. Imagine the scene: a vast enemy camp lit only by torches in the night's darkness. While the Assyrian soldiers slept, confident in their coming victory, a being invisible to human eyes descended in silence. There was no sound of swords, no battle cries. Judgment came in a hidden yet unstoppable way. The battle that Jerusalem could not fight was about to be won by heavenly hands. And here comes the inevitable question: if a single angel was capable of confronting 185,000 warriors, what did he do on that silent night? The suspense hangs in the air. The answer would only come with the dawn, when the city would awaken and behold the result of invisible power. Night fell over Jerusalem. Inside the city walls, the people tried to rest, though fear kept them awake. Outside, the Assyrian camp remained silent, lit by torches flickering in the wind. Nothing seemed different from any other night of siege. But behind the scenes, in the invisible realm, something supernatural was already in motion. The biblical text records it with stunning simplicity. And it came to pass on a certain night that the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. 2 Kings 19:35. A single line, yet filled with power. There is no description of swords, no account of battle, only divine judgment that descended silently and irresistibly. What no wall could stop, heaven accomplished through a single messenger. Imagine the dawn in Jerusalem. The people awaken, fearing the sound of enemy trumpets, but instead they find silence. The watchmen look toward the camp and see the unthinkable. Thousands of fallen soldiers, the most feared army of its time, reduced to nothing, without a single arrow having been fired at the city. The miracle could not be denied, and its magnitude echoed throughout the region. This was the moment when God made it clear that the battle did not belong to men, but to him. Jerusalem, small and defenseless, beheld an impossible victory. And here, the narrative opens an inevitable question. If a single angel could defeat the greatest empire of that era in just one night, what could the Almighty God not do for those who trust in him? When the sun rose, there was no battle left to fight. The army that boasted of being invincible lay in deadly silence. Sennacherib, the king who had defied the living God with arrogant words, now had no choice but to retreat. The Bible records, "So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went away, returned home, and remained at Nineveh." 2 Kings 19:36. The one who had threatened to invade Jerusalem left without even firing a single arrow at the city. The divine irony is clear. The mighty enemy fled without a fight because the Lord had already won the battle for his people. Assyria, so proud of its conquests, suffered an invisible and irreversible blow. The confidence of an empire crumbled in the face of a single act of God. Thus, Isaiah's prophetic word was fulfilled literally and undeniably. Historically, this defeat marked the beginning of Assyria's decline. The king who once marched as a conqueror saw his glory wither. Ancient sources record that years later, Sennacherib would be killed by his own sons in the Temple of Nineveh. 2 Kings 19:37. The one who blasphemed against the Lord ended his days in tragedy, proving that no one can exalt themselves against the Most High and go unpunished. For Jerusalem, the victory without swords was proof that salvation comes from the Lord. The people not only survived, they witnessed the humiliation of their enemy. And this raises an inevitable question. If God was able to defeat the greatest empire of the time with just one angel, what could he not do in the battles we face today? The power demonstrated that night was merely a glimpse of what heaven holds in abundance. If a single angel was able to defeat the greatest army of that era in just a few hours, what can be said of the legions of angels who obey the voice of God? Jesus himself declared, "Do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels?" Matthew 26:53. If 12 legions were at his disposal, imagine the reach of that power. Psalm 91 also reminds us, "For he shall give his angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways." Psalm 91:11. In other words, the same God who sent the angel of the Lord against Assyria is the God who commands his angels to protect those who trust in him. The message is clear. We don't need to measure life solely by visible strength because heavenly armies are at work beyond what we can see. This perspective changes the way we view our battles. If one angel can bring down an empire, what would God not do in our lives when we surrender to him in sincere prayer? This reflection creates a direct link between the biblical story and the personal experience of the viewer. The impossible, what seems insurmountable to human eyes, becomes merely a detail in light of divine intervention. And yet, the greatest power in this story is not just in witnessing angelic might, but in understanding that God, in his love, mobilizes heaven on behalf of those who trust in him. The question that arises is, how can this truth transform the way we face our challenges today? The story of the angel who struck down 185,000 soldiers is not just a distant tale from the past. It teaches us that when all seems lost, the first step should be the same as Hezekiah's: place the situation in God's hands. Prayer is not a sign of weakness, but of trust. It is the acknowledgement that there are battles we cannot win alone, but heaven fights for us. The second application is clear. Sincere prayer moves the heart of God. Hezekiah didn't present strategies. He opened his heart in humility. This reminds us that we don't need elaborate words or complex rituals to be heard. God responds to sincerity, not eloquence. The cry that rises from the truth of the heart is enough to move invisible armies. Finally, we learn that God always has resources we cannot see. Jerusalem could never have imagined that an angel would be sent that night, but it was precisely through the improbable that victory came. Likewise, in our lives, God has hidden paths, unexpected solutions, and answers that go beyond our understanding. What seems impossible to human eyes is simply an opportunity for his power to be revealed. These simple applications turn the narrative into a personal invitation. In the face of our own walls and enemies, we can choose to trust the same God who rose up for Jerusalem. But this leaves us with an inevitable question. How can that trust change the way we face today's challenges? The story of besieged Jerusalem is not just about walls, armies, and ancient kings. It's also about us. Because at some point in life, we all face our own Assyrian army, situations that seem bigger than we can bear. For some, it might be an illness with no easy cure. For others, the weight of loneliness. For many, debt, family struggles, or fears about the future. Each of us knows what it's like to look beyond the walls of life and feel there's no way out. But the message of this episode is clear. It's not the strength of the enemy that determines the outcome, but our trust in God. Just as Jerusalem seemed defenseless, we too feel fragile in the face of certain battles. Yet Hezekiah's victory reminds us that one divine act can completely change the story. We don't need many resources. Sometimes all it takes is a sincere prayer, a true cry from the heart for God to intervene. This connection between past and present gives us hope. If God could send a single angel to defeat 185,000 soldiers, can't He also act in our personal struggles? He is still the same God who protects, responds, and transforms. The question is, are we willing to surrender our battles to Him, just as Hezekiah did? So the final question echoes as an invitation to reflect. What is your Assyrian army today? And what would happen if you placed that situation before God, believing that He still sends His angels on behalf of those who trust in Him? One angel, one night. 185,000 soldiers struck down without a single sword being raised in Jerusalem. This story reminds us that victory doesn't come from human strength, but from the power of the living God, who intervenes when all seems lost. And now, I ask you, what is your Assyrian army today? What battle feels bigger than you can face? Hezekiah's story shows us that sincere prayer paves the way for the impossible to happen. If God sent an angel to change the destiny of an entire nation, can't He also act in your life? Picture this scene. The walls still stand, the city awakens in silence, and outside, the enemy is gone. In the same way, God can move in your life, in unexpected, invisible, and unstoppable ways. What once seemed like the end may become the beginning of a new victory. Leave a comment sharing which part of this story most strengthened your faith. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on the bell to receive more messages of hope. And may the Almighty God, the same who fought for Jerusalem, always be with you. May He bless your life and give you peace.